Hello and welcome to the My Hope Story podcast from Hope Community Church Barlanark. Stories of hope, all about Jesus.
Who are we, but sinners saved by grace?
Excellent. So, John, great to have you. This is our second, what we're calling our HOPEbeyond podcast. So, guys, I've been interviewed by Anthony in our church for our My Hope Story podcast. And last week, I interviewed Stuart Patterson, which is great. I think I said that to you, didn't I? And I was like, you should come and do this. Yes, right. John was like, yes, I'm desperate to talk to you, Pete. So that's good. Now, John is he's local MSP and he lives in Barlanark as well, which is cool. Maybe come on to that in a bit. But thank you for coming, John.
That's great. Nice to be along. Thank you.
Yeah. So, John, let's just chat through then, I guess, your childhood upbringing. Obviously, you're here because you are a Christian, and we can chat a wee bit about that as well. But where were you born? What was family life like when you were growing up?
Okay, well, originally I'm from Rutherglen, which, in case anybody doesn't know, that's just outside Glasgow. We do not consider ourselves Glaswegians, so I'm an incomer in that sense. But I was brought up there, and, well, I mean, I might as well give you my age at the start. So I'm 63, so that was in the 60s.
Wow.
And, still a lot of people went to church in Scotland at that point, out of tradition, out of habit, and our family did as well. I think, looking back, my mother had a stronger faith than my father. He was a bit more nominal. And the church was pretty liberal, I would say.
But was it Baptist Church?
Church of Scotland, Presbyterian. So I think I've always accepted that God existed. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't ever remember questioning that, really, that there was a God and God existed. But I don't remember hearing anything at church about you could have a personal relationship with God. Mm-hmm. You could kind of know him or anything like that. Yeah. So it was in my teens at school through Scripture Union that I came to realise that you can have a personal relationship with God. And again, for me, for some people it is very much on this day, at this time, I gave my life to Christ. And that's great. But for me, I think it was more of a kind of gradual thing when I was maybe 14, that kind of age. Yeah. That as I began to understand more, I maybe kind of gradually made more of a commitment. Mm-hmm. And so by the time I was in whatever third, fourth year, I would say I was definitely a Christian, yes, a believer. But it wasn't.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I can't remember that one moment either. I remember a number of moments that.
Yes. So people are different. I mean, the important thing is that you know Jesus now. Yeah. How you came to know him, well, we see that in the Bible. People came to follow Jesus in lots of different ways.
Yeah. Wait, I was going to say, this is cool. I actually don't know much of your story, so I didn't even know you were from Rutherglen originally, which is kind of cool. So
which is why I'm a Clyde supporter.
Okay. That's not, like, Rutherglen's not in Clyde near Cumbernauld.
Well, it was.
Oh, is it?
Because Clyde played at Shawfield.
Oh, really?
Although actually, not to get too diverted off the subject, but Clyde originally started in the East End of Glasgow, at an area called Barrowfield. So I am the MSP for the area where Clyde used to be. Then they went to Rutherglen, to Shawfield, which is just on the edge of Rutherglen, Glasgow. That is. And they were there for quite a long time, became homeless, and now we're in Cumbernauld. So.
See, I just assumed it was a political thing that you support, like just that you'll keep yourself on either side of the divide. So that's
well, I don't know if we're going to talk about sectarianism further along, but yeah, there are issues. But I mean, there are MSPs, for example, who support both Rangers. Well, some support Rangers, some support Celtic, and are quite open about it. But I think there are some advantages in supporting one of the other teams.
Yeah. I mean, admittedly, that's why one of the reasons why I support Motherwell. Like, from my background in Northern Ireland, most people assume I would support Rangers. And there's a number of reasons why I didn't, but I think that's a helpful thing too. Supporting Motherwell as a pastor, you don't necessarily get cast in one of those.
But also, I mean, it affects lots of parts of my life that I would rather support the small thing
the underdog, rather
than the big thing. So, I mean, I'm always delighted, frankly, when any smaller club beats Rangers and Celtic. And it's the same with businesses, and it's the same, I suppose, with people. I mean. It's the small person's often worth spending time on.
Anyway, so Rutherglen growing up, like, did you always been in Rutherglen then, like throughout childhood? You went to school in Rutherglen. Like, what was that like?
Well, I did notice that when you interviewed Stuart that he was at Hutchie for 3 years. Yeah. So interestingly enough, I was at Hutchie.
Really?
So I primary up to 4, I was in Burnside, and then after that it was at Hutchie, which. I'm not broadly supportive now of independent or private schools. There's probably a place for them. I mean, because I came to faith through school, and that's obviously the main thing in my life, I don't want to be too critical, but I certainly didn't enjoy school. You know, a lot of people say it was the best days of their life. Well, it was not the best days of my life.
Like any particular reasons? Was it?
Well, I kind of thought it, but I didn't enjoy it really. And I mean, it was quite a competitive environment.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm in schools occasionally now, but not so much. But I mean, if you weren't good at sport, then you were pretty far down the pecking order. And if you were good at sport, you were at the top. And I wasn't good at sport for many years until we get the chance to do cross-country running, which I found I could do. So then suddenly, you know, it changed a bit. But most of the stuff I quite enjoyed maths, but that was about it.
And were you into like modern studies? Did you have that back in the day, modern studies?
We didn't have modern studies then, no.
Was
So
there any
that
kind
wasn't
of
an option.
political stuff or anything?
I mean, I'm an accountant, we'll come on to that, but I mean, we didn't have accounts, didn't have economics, nothing like that. It was pretty traditional.
What about like public speaking or anything? Were you in the debating team?
No, I mean, that was not... There was a debating club, I think, but I did not like public speaking. If there was one thing, I mean, I told you I didn't like school that much, but if there was one thing I really hated, it was, I think in the English classes, we had to give a speech for 2 minutes or something. And that was one of the worst experiences of my life. I just hated that. And so it's interesting, and I would say God's been part of that to bring me to where I am now. And I quite enjoy this kind of talking, but I mean, even you know, making a speech or that kind of thing, I wouldn't say it came naturally to me. But you know, a good thing tied in with coming to faith through SU was some of the teachers, Christian teachers in the school. And there was one called John McKee, who, you know, went beyond just being a teacher. And, you know, actually some of the stuff probably wouldn't be allowed now, but in a holiday home it was a converted church. He was changing into a house in Arden, and we used to go down and help him, you know. And all of that, I mean, that's been part of my background. And, you know, another teacher, Martin Petty, was a maths teacher. And, you know, they had a big impact on my life, encouraged me in things, because I didn't have any self-confidence or anything, so...
That's just, again, weirdly enough,
good.
Similar story to me. Like, I hated English talks. I used to, like, total shrinking when you do that thing, and then now I kind of talk for a living, so it is funny how God takes those things and changes it. Like, friends at school, like, were you, like, did you have any Christians who were friends who were Christians? Did you,
yeah,
like,
so,
what kind of stuff were you into?
I mean, the
mates?
school was quite, you know, the school was not, on the whole, didn't have a Christian ethos, I would say. And so we were definitely a minority, and that was quite a good place to be, I think. And, you know, because I've always been in a minority, Christian minority since then, including in my present job. And so, you know, I remember having arguments with others in the class and things. And there was
I'm sure you wouldn't argue, John. I can't imagine that. But
well, that's good. But no, there was a group of us committed Christians, and funnily enough, some of us have started getting together again recently, having not really been in touch very much. But Zoom has lets you meet up. So, yeah, that's been good. So, I mean, good things came out of school, but as I say, it wasn't my main thing. And then maths, I think I said, was the subject I did enjoy, but I didn't want to be a teacher. I knew that. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my father was an engineer, my mother was a teacher. So eventually I kind of fell into accountancy, which I didn't know much about, quite frankly, but I knew it was numbers. And so that I did a degree and then trained as a chartered accountant CA.
Where'd you go to degree?
After, Glasgow. That was all Glasgow. My training was in Glasgow. And that was, I'm not sure I enjoyed university very much either, but actual, moving forward a bit, I mean, accountancy on the whole, I mean, I like that. I like working with numbers. I enjoyed accountancy, although I don't get very much chance to do it now.
That's fine. Do you know that I did accountancy at uni as well?
I
feel like I'm interviewing myself here, John, just a lot older. I
Is
don't know what have you got brothers or sisters?
Yes, I've got a brother and sister, and my brother's a vet, so he's down in Wales, and my sister's in Cambuslang. She's a nurse. And my mother's
close family?
Sorry?
Close as a family?
I think we've got quite strong relationships, but I wouldn't say close so much, but I suppose it depends how you define these things. I mean, I don't know when this is going out. My mother is in a care home in Rutherglen and heading towards the end of her life, I would say. But that's it. My father had an interesting death, if that's not, if you'd like to say that. He'd not been well. He was a heavy smoker all his life and had an aneurysm and things, but Latterly, his faith became much stronger. Okay. They had an evangelical minister, came to that same church.
What church was it?
It was called Stone Law.
Okay.
And so having been, we had a small group within it who did Bible studies and things. Yeah. So there was a kind of core for quite a number of years, but I wouldn't have said it was an evangelical church. And then a new minister came and it changed quite a lot. My father came to a much stronger faith through that, which was about the time he was retiring and things. So he got more involved in the church, and he was in the church choir, and he was singing one Sunday in the church choir, and he just died like that. Wow. Which I suppose from his point of view was pretty good. Yeah. You know, a good place to be, but a bit of a shock for everyone else.
On a Sunday morning?
On a Sunday morning.
Were you there?
I wasn't there, my mother was there.
And how long ago was that?
Oh, well, she was 1997, so quite a while ago.
And that is interesting.
Yes, that's right, but it's a good way to go. I mean, when you look at, you know, there's these big moral questions of assisted dying and things, which is quite current. And they are difficult questions because I've seen my mother just decline very, very slowly over quite a long period. And that's quite tough going, both for her and for everyone else. And my father, you know, and you can say partly through his own fault because he smoked so heavily, but, you know, just dying very suddenly.
In some ways that was easier potentially.
Well, there's something quite attractive about that, I think. But
because I know you've been, like, as part of the last year, like, quite pushing for some care home visit and stuff as well. I guess it must be quite hard with your mum being so close and yet you can't.
Yes, we didn't see her for a while, and then we were fortunate that it's quite a small care home, and it's well, I can probably say it's Abbeyfield, which is third sector and smaller, and so it's not a big kind of international company or anything. And they've been good, and so we've been able to, like, we could sit outside and she was inside, and we could see her. So I mean, I saw her a week past Sunday, and my sister saw her on Sunday, so we'll see where that goes.
So you got brother, sister, mum and dad going to Stone Law, Church of Scotland.
Yes.
They're using phrases here like evangelical, like, which obviously I would identify as evangelical as well. Like, so when you, through Scripture Union, would you have, like, identified as that then? Would you have known what that meant? Like, I'm an evangelical Christian now, or was that?
Well, I think we were quite hard line. I mean, I remember one of my friends saying that we thought, and I was part of that as well, probably, that if you hadn't become a Christian through Scripture Union, you weren't a real Christian. Okay. So we were, I'm afraid, quite critical of the rest of the church, and I think in retrospect, a little bit too harsh. And I also remember flaming rows with my father, who I saw as very liberal and not really born again. So over whether at meal table, and I remember my mother getting upset one time because it was a church kind of meeting, and I was arguing with my father in public in the church, and my mother said she couldn't really handle that. So yes, I was a little bit. Some of us were a bit. That's interesting. Harder line at the time, perhaps.
And so was it through, like? So I was involved in SU for a long time growing up. I was mainly involved in camps in the summer, a little bit of the schools work. So when you were saying Scripture Union, were you meaning school stuff?
Both, yes. I had camps as well. I was very involved. Campsites, especially at School, which is near North Berwick.
It's my first camp. Yeah,
and but occasionally at places like King's Cross and Arden, and I did a sailing thing one time and different things. So.
And so as you were going through high school at Hutchie, like before you went to uni for your accountancy, was SU still a kind of key part to?
No, SU was the key part because there was little happening in church really. I mean, I did feel because some of my friends, the issue was that some people would leave a kind of what we call dead churches, which again was a little bit harsh, but let's say less lively churches, and would head off to maybe something else. And Queen's Park Baptist, then as now, was quite a big, flourishing, lively church in the south side of Glasgow. So I had friends who basically left whatever church they were in and went there. However, I think partly because we did have a Bible study group in the church, and so we had a kind of core, and I felt that I should stay in that church. And so
as you went to uni as well,
teaching Bible class. So all through uni, I stayed at home and was involved in the church, but also got involved in Christian Union. Okay. And so that was great because then a very wide range of speakers. I realise I'm getting older, but people like Willie Still, and there was something called the Crieff Fellowship, George Duncan from the Tron. Were fabulous speakers. Richard Gorey from SU. and they would come regularly every Thursday and speak to the students. So a lot of my Christian growth was through SU, through Christian Union, and also reading. I mean, I devoured books like C.S. Lewis and J.I. Packer and all these kind of people, John Stott. So that was very much how I grew as a Christian. So I'm still a real believer in books and reading, how important that is. And I fear, maybe people aren't as good at that these days.
Yeah, that's one of the things we would do as well. We would, I regularly give out books. Like, we've got books that we would write, but even I would happily give out Packer. I gave out a copy of Knowing God last week. Tons of them. I think there's so much to be said just by, if you want to know Jesus yourself, there's this desire to want to know more, and books are just a great way to do that.
Well, and especially if you don't have maybe the Christian background, or the Evangelical Christian background, which I didn't have through church and things, that books were a great way to get to. But I mean, at that time, within the Church of Scotland too, the Evangelicals were a pretty small group, and there was this thing called the Crieff Fellowship, or sometimes called the Magic Circle, and there was jokes about they could meet in a telephone box and all this kind of thing because there were so few. Whereas that's really changed, and one of the encouraging things in the Church of Scotland is, how many more evangelical ministers there are now, which is excellent.
So we can chat a wee bit, I guess, further on whenever because I know you're not a part of the Church of Scotland just now, but you're through uni, CU, it's going well, and then what happens after uni then? So you graduate, could you do your accountancy professional qualifications as well? Like, is that still in Glasgow? Like, where's...
Yes, so I did a CA training, so it was like an apprenticeship basically. So you went and worked for 3 years and did your studying block release and things as well, which I did better. Some people did better at university and then couldn't handle studying and working together, whereas I was the other way around. University was kind of laid back and not very disciplined, and I'd got through, but just, and then but once there was a real pressure on from work and studying together, I got through that okay. So that was good. And that was one of the big firms in Glasgow, but they had offices all around the world. And in 1979, Rhodesia was a problem. They had declared UDI.
I have no idea what you're talking about right now, John.
So Rhodesia was part of the British Empire. They decided they wanted to remain a white country ruling the blacks. So they declared Unilateral Declaration of Independence, UDI, which was not recognised really by anybody except South Africa, which also obviously had apartheid at the time. So as a result, Zambia was next door, and the firm I was with couldn't get anyone to go to Zambia because they were all worried about what was happening next door. So they got some of us who were still training to go for 3 months at a time. And so I had 3 months in Zambia, which was my first time, really outside Europe. We didn't go on foreign holidays really much as a family, and so that was completely different, but also, only 3 months, but quite informative. Was involved in a Brethren church there, got to know, and Zambia, I mean, it was, at that time certainly, kind of Christianity was much more up front and to the fore than it is here, and if you gave somebody a lift, they would say, God bless you at the end, which didn't happen in Scotland. So it let me see that I could cope living overseas in a pretty strange environment, culture. But I did feel at the same time that if I ever did go overseas, it wouldn't be probably to a country like that, which was so, kind of openly Christian.
So what age would you have been at that point?
1979, 22 maybe-ish, that's right. So
I was just 3 months at a time, and then you came back?
Well, I was only there for 3 months, I mean, full stop, but it was, it was interesting, it was significant, and it certainly took away any fear I had of going to live in strange places. So I trained as an accountant, so that took about 3-4 years, but I didn't like auditing, which was the main part of the training. So I was praying about and thinking about, but not expecting kind of a lot of guidance so much at that stage as to what my next step should be. And I'd wondered, I mean, I did actually apply for a job with Greg's the Bakers, who were based in Rutherglen, and got quite close. And I think there was 40 people applied for the job, and it got down to 2, and I came second, and I was really disappointed at the time, but then I thought, well, God's hand's in that, because if I was no use for the job, I wouldn't even have got down to that level, the final interview. And if he'd wanted me to get it, it must have been pretty close, so he could have got it. So I felt that he had specifically closed the door on that route. And then I began to think, well, where else? Because it struck me Greggs was quite kind of, it wasn't making nuclear weapons or whiskey or anything bad, but bread and cakes.
I was going to say whiskey's bad. That's a faux pas there. We need to edit that out.
Well, it was a company making bread and cakes and things. I felt was quite something you can be quite committed to, let's say. So then I thought, well, I began to think, well, maybe I should work for a Christian organisation, and kind of looked and prayed, and I was getting prayer letters from different places. And Operation Mobilisation, I'd thought of going with them before, maybe in the summer for a month or so.
And they wanted to do the ships?
Yes.
Okay.
So they had one ship originally, then two, and now it's back to one again. But yes, they were originally, it started in America. George Verwer, who again I would encourage people to read his books. But he started going to Mexico, and he was an interesting character if you've ever heard him speak.
I think I've actually heard him speak on the ship, like maybe 15 years ago.
Right.
Would that be possible?
Okay. Yes, the ships have been in Scotland, Northern Ireland. The first place, when they Logos and Doulos, the first place, I think the two ships ever were in the same place together was Belfast.
Okay.
But anyway, so yes, he started off. He took students down to Mexico and evangelised way back. He became a Christian through Billy Graham. And started Operation Mobilisation, and I was attracted to it. I mean, I'd heard about them when I was at university, and they seemed pretty committed to me. And so I found out they needed an accountant, or a few accountants, so I joined OM for 2 years. So I was doing accountancy, but in very much a Christian context.
In Glasgow still? Or?
No, that was in London, in Bromley in Kent.
Okay.
Which was the main base at the time. George Verwer was based there. The book ministry, what was called STL, Send the Light, was based there as well. And so that was one of the main hubs for OM, and I had 2 years there. And I mean, the accountancy side was fine. I mean, it was fairly straightforward. But I think two things probably I got from that. One was the emphasis on missions and the needs around the world. Because, I mean, that's 1982, 3, that kind of time. Scotland's pretty needy. I mean, there's, definitely a Christian minority here. But when you start hearing about other countries, and I remember at that time in Turkey, it was kind of a handful of Christians in the whole of Turkey and 50 million people. Okay. And, so I really had my eyes open to the needs around the world.
And so when you're talking about mission and need, you mean the need for people to become Christians?
Yes, absolutely. And OM at that time, OM's changed, but I mean, at that time, that was absolutely the focus. There was a bit more of a divide between, helping people with their physical needs and digging wells and things, which Tier Fund and others do. But OM's absolute focus was on, and it was it was a bit more strict at that time. You weren't allowed to ask for money, so you could only pray for money, and then if people asked, so you were always in a shoestring.
Yeah.
And we lived it was communal living. You get a few pounds maybe for pocket money, and that was about it. So although I was in London, I certainly didn't see very much of London if it wasn't free. But the other thing was prayer. That really changed me as far as prayer was concerned, because there was such an emphasis on prayer. They had every Tuesday night, I think, from about 7 till midnight, half night of prayer. Just for missions.
Wow.
So we're not praying for your needs or my needs or anything, just for missions. Turkey, India, whatever. And that was revolutionary for me, and it was a challenge, and lots of people found it a challenge to pray for missions for 5 hours every Tuesday. But it kind of really changed my prayer life, and then it had a kind of knock-on effect on the rest of my prayer, because if I'm praying for missions for 5 hours, well, I want to pray a bit more for other things too. So then I would pray, and OM was into memorising, scripture, like you learned Philippians off.
Wow,
and all
you
this
still
kind
know
of thing. I would be struggling now. I suppose it's in there somewhere. They say you don't forget things, you just can't remember them.
So that's a real time of growth for you as a Christian. You
Yes,
think?
yes. And which I saw, I mean, OM was a mission organisation in itself, but I think I saw it at the time and still do as also a training organisation. So a lot of people spent just a year or two and then went on to something else. But it had a huge impact on me. And George Verwer still is one of the Christian leaders that I most respect anywhere and still keeps in touch. I mean, he's over 80 now. He still writes to me. It's unbelievable because I've met a lot of people, I've been a lot of places, but he is remarkable in the way he's held that together, because within that, there was charismatics, there was non-charismatics, there was just such a mixture of people, not to mention cultures, American, European, and yet everybody had this respect for him, and it continued. OM continues, but
my folks are right into OM, so I think my stepdad would have loved to go on the ship. My mum's a bit more of a homebird.
Yeah, I never went on the ships. I visited the ships, but anyway, and we did a lot of door-to-door evangelism and things in London as well on Friday
So were you a member of a church down there?
Yes, we had to. That was one of the rules. I mean, OM was quite strict.
Good. I like us OM, by the way. Maybe we should get them back.
Before you even joined, you had to read certain books. Which I believe they don't do that anymore. But anyway, yes, you had to be in a local church, and I suppose I don't always, do what everybody else does. I don't go with the flow. And I went to a Methodist church, which wasn't particularly evangelical. It was more like my home church, in that there was a core group of people, of committed Christians within it, and a lot of it was a bit liberal. Mm-hmm. But again, there was the house group, Bible studies, and I was the only OM person who went to that church. Most of them went to Baptist or Pentecostal or something like that. So, but I used to visit other churches. I used to go to like Westminster Chapel and other churches in London occasionally, so that was a good experience. Ichthus, if you've ever come across them, Roger and Faith Foster. So I've still got connections with them. So that was while I was with OM.
The 2 years then in London.
Yes.
And then what happened? Where'd you go after that?
Well, I felt it was a prayer meeting one night, and one of these long prayer meetings. And I just felt God saying to me that I should go to a country where it wasn't easy to preach the gospel. So I kind of put out feelers out. The Church of Scotland I started with. So in other words, I mean, I'm not an evangelist. That's not my gift. Mm-hmm. Stuart, like last week you had, I think it is his gift. So, and I think we're all meant to evangelise and share the gospel, but, I think some people have a special gifting in that regard.
I think I agree.
Arthur Blessett, if you remember. I mean, he used to...
You're quoting old folk here, John, come on. I'm a young
What he did, he had a cross, and he took this cross, with a wheel at the end, and walked with this cross
I think I have heard
across America, across Africa, like all around the world. Just amazing guy. And he was somebody, all he needed to say, this was a kind of joke, if he said bananas, somebody would become a Christian. He just had this gift. There was this thing about him. And so some people have that, was my point. But I don't. And so I spoke to Church of Scotland, and they said, well, there's one or two places we're needing an accountant, and one is Nepal, and whatever. And so that kind of began to move forward a bit. And then the Church of Scotland had problems with its budget, and they said they couldn't send me. But they told what's called the United Mission to Nepal, which was a kind of umbrella body, that I was available. So they said, well, you could come with another mission organisation. So I went with what was called BMMF and is now called Interserve. Okay. And so they specialised in taking in professional people, so that could be doctors, foresters, hydro engineers, nurses, accountants, anything, into work in Nepal. We worked jointly with the government. You were only allowed to go if you had that kind of job.
And would it have been closed to like Christians at that point? Yeah.
So there wasn't persecution in the sense of North Korea or Saudi Arabia or something, but it was against the law to change your religion, and you were not allowed to evangelize. So that was two of the kind of key things. So like if people became Christians, they got baptized at night, and foreigners weren't allowed, it would just be a few people. And there were Christian pastors in prison at that time, mainly for baptizing people. That was the key thing. They didn't mind you going to church so much, but if somebody got baptized, that was seen as the key thing. And it was mainly the pastor rather than the person being baptized who was put in prison. But again, that was a tremendous experience, 3 years, and completely different culture.
So what was life like there? So you're working as an accountant for the mission organisation?
Yes, this United Mission to Nepal. They had several hospitals, some schools, hydro schemes, forestry, a whole range of things. Because Nepal at that time would be one of the 6 poorest countries in the world. It had only opened, it had not been colonised because Britain had done a deal with them. And so that's where the Gurkhas came from in the army. And so there was an agreement, but India, for better or worse, got roads and railways through the British. Nepal got none of that. So even in the 50s, they had no roads to speak of, no railways, no nothing. Virtually no electricity, and only in the 50s did they open up. So even by the 80s, they hadn't moved very far forward. Loads of areas didn't have any roads, there was no TV, and, just very, very basic. And so we had our organisation, we had hospitals and different things.
And so did you see, was there many opportunities to share the gospel when you're out there?
Yes.
And you saw fruit from that?
Well, first of all, there was many opportunities to share the gospel. Yes, the church was growing and has continued to grow and was vibrant. And it was great because here you had all this tradition, Ireland, Scotland, as we do. There, no one had been a Christian more than about 10 years. And most of them had only been a Christian 2 years. So it was just this fresh, vibrant thing and a lot of young guys in it because it was quite hard. So you had to be fairly strong to come out openly as a Christian because there'd be family opposition, possibly job problems, government's not keen. So it wasn't easy for them.
A big cost account?
Yes, not as I say, not as bad as some places. But that was exciting to be part of that. And then I was still only in my 20s, but, I was kind of mature compared to some. And although they had pastors and all that kind of stuff as well. So it was just being there and interacting with people, and people were very open to talk about spiritual stuff. And language was a bit of a challenge, but in some ways it's easy. It's good to speak in simple language, and both working with children through SU and being in Nepal taught me to just try and say things simply. So there was the word for prayer was really difficult, and it took me ages to get my hand around it. So I just used to say I was talking to God, which is what we do. But in one sense it made more of an impact. So you're getting your hair cut, and here you have a chat with the barber, but probably it doesn't, unless you really push it, it may not go down spiritual lines. But there it did all the time. Why are you in Nepal? Because God told me to come. Oh, how did God tell you to come? We're really interested. So you could have that conversation all the time. To the extent that actually people said if a miracle happened, the missionaries would have been more surprised than the locals. Because they were living in a spiritual kind of realm, as Hindus mainly. Whereas, we came from this secular, materialistic background where we didn't expect God to do very much. But the reality was the church was growing. Again, I'm still not an evangelist, but I'm praying with people, and people wanted to learn English, so I used the Good News Bible and things, simple English to talk to people and things.
So there's obviously a lot, that's obviously impacted your life since you've been home as well, a lot in terms of just that experience.
Well, I was there for 3 years, but so that 1/21st of my life, but it made an absolutely huge impact on me. And then things like poverty. Now we have poverty in the East End of Glasgow, and there's a lot I want to change, but you see the poverty there. You see nice pictures in Nepal, that's great. You don't smell them because the postcards don't smell. But going down the road, at the side of the road, there's effectively open sewers and things, and there's flies everywhere, and very basic health needs. Kids dying of diarrhea because at that time the thinking was kids get diarrhea, too much fluid, stop the fluids. Whereas we would know losing fluid, get as much fluid into them as possible. And simple solutions of salt and sugar and water could cure that, and yet kids were dying of it. So, real life expectancy, 45 or something like that. So, just blatant needs, huge needs. Villages with no water supply, no sanitation, no nothing. So
what brought you back then to Scotland?
Well, I just felt, I felt long term that wasn't, for me, that it was the right place. I was upset when I left, but I just felt it was right to come back. I had a sense that I should come back to Scotland. And not to be too political, but I did become more nationalistic while I was in Nepal. Nepal itself has 2 big neighbours, China and India, who are both a threat to it and its independence, because like Sikkim and Tibet have both India took one and
Yeah.
China took the other. So Nepal's not secure in that sense, and when I was there it was only 15 million people, so it was very small compared to India and China. But they were independent and they wanted to be independent. Plus I was meeting New Zealanders who were very international, and New Zealanders who didn't want to be part of Australia and Canadians who didn't want to be part of America and such like. So my political kind of thinking changed because I was always interested but never very involved. And so when I came back, that's when I got more involved. I joined the SNP and gradually got more involved.
And so did you come back to do accountancy again over here in Scotland?
Yes, I came back and I had a short spell with a firm of accountants. Then I was with a nursing home group, which is, you mentioned nursing homes I think earlier on. And so I am, some people are sceptical or even antagonistic towards nursing homes as a concept. I am personally pretty positive towards care homes and nursing homes. Having worked in that sector, again, good and bad within it, but I think it's the right place for some elderly people to be, and has been the right place for my mother. It's been excellent.
It's like when you come back to church in.
Yeah, so I came back, stayed with a friend in the West End of Glasgow, and went to. I've been in quite a few churches. When I was in Nepal, so I told you I was in the Church of Scotland to start with. Then I was in Brethren in Zambia. Methodist in London, Assemblies of God, Pentecostal when it was in Kathmandu, which again wasn't approved of. They were trying. The foreigners hoped to keep the church in Nepal from having denominations. They thought maybe it could be the first country in the world not to have denominations, which they failed, I'm afraid. So, but even at that time, the AOG were there, so I went to that church, partly because it had fewer foreigners, and. So I came back, sharing a flat with a friend in the West End, and went to what was called Glasgow Christian Fellowship, which was an independent church. So I was there for 2 years, and then my flatmate, he was in the Tron and felt called into the ministry, so he was going to Aberdeen to study, giving up the flat, so I had to find somewhere to stay. And I'd always wondered if I should move into, let's say, a poorer area. And I thought, if Jesus came to Glasgow, would he stay in Bearsden or would he stay in Easterhouse? So I felt pretty convinced he would stay in Easterhouse. So one Saturday I just drove around the East End. I didn't really know the East End. If you were in Rutherglen, you didn't really go to the East End too much.
Well, it's actually not that far, isn't it? It's like a couple miles.
And prayed. And by this time I'm expecting, through my life, we're not really touching that, but at first I didn't expect God to guide me. I just prayed. I'd prayed, but then kind of did it. But then now I was coming to the stage where I expected God to guide me a bit more. And drove around the East End and saw these flats being done up in Barlanark. And it was a whole chunk of flats, Sandegg Road, Pendeen, that bit, which the council had just sold them all off to Bellway. Okay. And so they weren't sold off one by one. It was just the whole thing. And they gutted the whole thing, took all the roofs off. It looked...
When was this?
89-ish, 88, 89. It was a kind of experiment. And Bellway got an award for it, and they did it well. And there was 272 flats or something like that in that whole section. And so I thought, that looks quite good. And they were kind of part way through at the time. So there was a house that somebody had lived in for a year and on sale, so I put in a bid. And I got it by... forgotten the amount, I think it was about £45. I was over the next bidder, which again I saw as God's kind of confirmation. So I very much felt that God was in that, me moving to the East End. My parents were horrified, I should say. My mother said, if we gave you some more money, would you go somewhere better? But no, it's been absolutely the right place, and so much of what's happened since then is because I've been living there.
I guess you love living, we talked even with Stuart and some of the guys before, that East End's had a bit of a bad rep over the years. Some of that maybe rightly so, some of that maybe not so rightly so. I think in many ways it is better, at least externally today, but you would have lived there through some of the years where Glasgow was known as for some of the things that are maybe stereotypically known for, like the night crime.
Glasgow's big enough, I don't know Belfast so much, but London, obviously the bigger cities, where they are very much, it's bits of the city, and people do not travel and know other bits of the city. And so if you were in the south side, as effectively Rutherglen was, you either stayed in the south side, or you might go to the West End or whatever, but you certainly wouldn't go to the north or the east. Yeah. And in fact, my flatmate, who is a tremendous committed Christian, and now a minister, his family had kind of come up from pretty basic background and got to the Knightswood in the West End.
Yeah.
So when I said to him, I'm buying a flat in Barlanark, he was absolutely horrified because it just went against the whole ethos of his family and many other people, the way they went, because people tend to go up in society, allegedly, rather than down. And there are cultural differences. I mean, because I started going immediately to East Irish Baptist Church, somebody had advised me to do that, and immediately people are much more open about their problems than I had found, a few miles away in Rutherglen. And at the end of the service, people come up and say they're struggling with alcohol or whatever it was, just a tremendous openness, which I found a bit strange to start with, and it took me a wee while to, despite having overcome the culture barrier with Nepal, I still found it a little bit of a challenge. But, and we all adapt, and you never, we all belong to different places. We're all a mixture, I suppose. So but my roots are not East End. I totally accept that, but I feel there's nowhere else I'd rather be now. And I've been 31 years now, and feel very much this is where God wants me to be. And the whole thing about politics, becoming a councillor, becoming an MP, MSP, has been very much linked to me actually being here.
And so would you have said at that point then, moving over to the East End, East Irish Baptist, obviously you said before you would have been quite conservative coming out of Scripture Union in terms of theology, and a bit of a, I don't know what you said, I would say nut job, but I guess you had a nicer way of saying it than that. Were you in a similar place then? Were you still firmly evangelical? You had the same convictions, or were they changing at all? Or?
Well, I'd say I was always evangelical. I mean, if we're going into the theological side of it, I would see the charismatic side of things as being a subset of the evangelical side, rather than a separate section. And I think there's been a kind of softening. I mean, there was, I can't remember when I first had contact much with the charismatic side of things, but, it was seen as very weird and very way out. And whereas now, I see much more of a mix nowadays. I mean, the kind of songs that are being used in worship are being used across the board, a lot of them. Not exactly the same, but... So I think there's a less hard and fast dividing line compared to what
you said to me before, it was more about how you expect God to speak to you, how you speak about religion. The prayer's always been a big part of that for you, you're saying?
Yes, I think, and I suppose that is maybe part of the kind of more charismatic side of things, that people are expecting God to speak about specific situations. But having said that, I mean, I've had a fair contact over the years with the brethren, and when sometimes it's the words that are used that are different.
It's semantic, isn't it?
Because people would talk about a burden, and if you take the mission field side of things, I've got a burden to go to Africa or something. I mean, that is quite, or was quite normal language in Brethren assembly circles.
I grew up the Brethren, it was a lot about opening doors,
yes,
and the Lord might open this door, which somebody might say something different.
I mean, sometimes we get very worked up about the words, and as I've got older and more experienced or whatever, I do see, I see positives in all the churches, and now I go around, jump on a bit, but I mean there's about 40 churches in East End in the area that I cover, that I'm aware of, and I try and go around them all once a year or thereabouts, a bit less at the moment, I'm afraid.
Usually during election time, isn't it? No?
Very good. No, all the time. And if a part of it is to do with me, if I am open and to God and looking to learn something from a service, I will virtually always get something, And some of them are very strange. I mean, we talked a little about the Free Church continuing. I also go to Catholic services, and, right across the board, Stuart's, yours, ours. And it's true. I mean, whatever it might be. I mean, I think we've talked a little before about, what the relationship should be with the Catholic Church, for example. But...
that'll be a whole other podcast.
Yes, okay, I'll leave that. I suppose I would just say that we're in a very secular society nowadays, and if we can work together with people as much as we can. But specifically on attending a Catholic service, one of the things I'm most like is when they read the Creed. The Apostles of Nicene, I get mixed up which, but it varies. But I just think there's something really good about that, because it's the key points of the Christian doctrine that we're pretty well all agreed on. Jesus' birth, Jesus' death, resurrection, coming again, these things. And okay, it misses out a lot, but there is something really good about saying that. And anything you say regularly, I know can become a problem. But so that's just an example. But I mean, any time you go and
Definitely, we've said that before here. We've said the Apostles' Creed, particularly whenever we can't sing, or been advised against that. We've said the Apostles' Creed because it does put you into the history of the Christian faith, doesn't it? This has been the message throughout. I guess, like, my question, I will maybe get onto that. It was just, as long as we are united on the core message of the gospel, and I guess that's where we've had discussions in the past about that one. We will get on. But so anyway, you're East Irish Baptist. You've just moved into Barlanark. And then I'm guessing this is where you're going to start, you're saying it more into the politics side. So how did that come about?
Well, I didn't even know how you joined a political party because nobody in my family was involved in politics or anything. We talked about it, but that was all. So I don't know, I can't even think of anyone I knew that was in a political party. But I was up in Inverness one time, must have been on holiday, and bumped into these SNP people out in the street and joined. So that was me joined, and then the system didn't always work, but it worked. So somebody locally phoned me up and invited me along to a meeting. And, it shows, I remember somebody saying with the churches, the difficult bit can sometimes be getting people into the fringe of the church. And then once they're in the fringe, you get to know them, you work on them, and they come to know Jesus, hopefully. And it was a bit the same in the sense of I would have been quite happy in the fringe and not involved, but people encouraged me, got me involved, and I got more and more involved and became the branch treasurer, convener. And then 1997, one of the local councillors in Garrahill died, and there was a by-election, and nobody else was too interested in standing, so I stood and became a councillor. So that was 1998.
So you won it? You won the...
Yes.
Oh, was it SNP before?
No.
Oh, wow.
But at that time, it was 1998, there was nobody in the SNP in the whole East End of Glasgow. There only were about 6, I think the SNP had about 5 or 6 councillors throughout the whole city. And I mean, that continued because I got elected again in 1999, and I think it was that year that there were 79 councillors in Glasgow and 74 were Labour. Yeah. We had 2, and there was 1 Tory, 1 Lib Dem, and Tommy Sheridan for the Socialists.
So what do you think, obviously God did that, but what was it, do you think, just particularly about you, that made people want it, okay, let's vote for this guy?
No, I don't think it was me at all. I mean, they didn't know me because I didn't know anyone. Well, I knew a few people, but I wasn't involved. I hadn't been heavily involved or anything. But no, there was circumstances, and I mean, well, we're now getting to the political side. I mean, I strongly believe that God wants people involved in Christians involved in politics. Not everybody, but some, and broadly in all the parties, because at the moment, at least, you can be a committed Christian and be in all the parties. You might want to talk about that later. But so I'm not for a minute saying God favours any of the political parties, and certainly not the SNP. But I do see it that He opened up the way for me to get involved in politics. And it was a mixture of things. I can't even remember all the details, but there had been cuts in I think the disability benefits at that time. And so the government was kind of unpopular, so there was a bit of a protest vote, and it was a seat we'd kind of done okay in, and lo and behold, we won it, which was a bit of a surprise at the time, because, I mean, this was before Scottish Parliament, so winning a council seat was quite a big deal.
So this was early 90s, you said?
No, this was 98, January 98. Okay.
So this was like New Labour down south, and, well, not down south.
Yes, it was Labour government at the time. I think Gordon Brown was the Chancellor. So, and then the next proper election was 99, which I managed to hold it, which was, we did not have a good election in 99, that was both council and Scottish Parliament, and but I managed to hold a seat, but we only had 2 of us, but we were the second biggest party in Glasgow. And there's a whole question about proportional representation, but I think most people accepted that this was not a good for democracy. But I became then leader of the opposition, which was a tremendous opportunity, because I got to speak in all the debates, I got to be in all the committees, and I got a bit of extra money so I could do it full time, because I'd been councillors that had done it part time before then. So, just a tremendous opportunity to do that, and so I could plan that kind of thing.
Like, we'll chat through your story and then maybe come back to some of the questions about how you work in politics. But obviously you must have been one of the few Christians, you think, in politics at that time, do you think? Or was there others around about you that...
Well, I think, to be fair, there's been Christians all the way through. And I mean, you go back to, what was it, the Clapham sect, and when was it?
Going again, John.
Lost again. Well, they were the ones that they got involved in things like abolishing slavery and
Okay. Yeah, okay.
I've forgotten all the names, Shaftesbury and some of these people. But that's going back to the 19th century. There have been Christians all the way through. And I mean, if we take even longer perspective, God puts these people in places. So we've got Daniel in the Old Testament. We've got Esther in the Old Testament. We've got Joseph in Egypt. And they're my kind of models, if you like, because it's that. I mean, Israel's this kind of unusual situation because it's God's people. And we don't have quite that nowadays. But when they were in exile, people like Daniel were committed to God and in this secular, pagan, whatever you want to call it, a government setup. And so I see that as I see that as the norm, and I see that's where we are now, that we're in a primarily secular society, and have been really probably all my life, although the Christian veneer has kind of gone away during that time. But God puts people in places all the way through.
No, for sure.
And, we've got now Lord Alton, David Alton, who's been around for a while at Westminster, and certainly from Northern Ireland, I know committed Christian politicians, and that's been true all the way through.
And so that's been so whenever you got into the politics side, you're like, I'm a Christian, so I love Jesus, but also this is the role I'm called to. So some people are called to minister other things. This is where I'm in.
Yeah, probably. Uh-huh.
And then, so where did that continue? So you were a councillor, 98, 99. What happened after that?
Well, for 10 years, and I enjoyed being a councillor. And if you're looking for prayer points, let's pray for the councillors, because they don't get a lot of publicity. They often don't get a lot of thanks. They don't get well paid. I mean, a councillor's getting about 17,000 for what in many cases is a full-time job.
Or like these MSPs who are raking it in.
Who are raking it in, and the MPs even more. That's right. So I enjoyed being a councillor. We had the previous system, you had just had a ward, which I'd had, and so you were the councillor for that ward. We then moved on to the proportional system, so it was a bigger ward and you had a few councillors. But either way, it's much more local. So you could be at the local schools, be at the community councils, be at the churches if you wanted. And that was good. And most of people's problems still are council problems. I mean, most of the problems people come with are, housing's still not council anymore, but was. But the roads, the parks, the refuse, these are the issues, the dog poo, that people come with. And they are council issues. So you could be very involved in things that matter to people. So I think it's a very important role, and I would certainly encourage people with a Christian commitment to go into that or consider it, and certainly to pray for it and have a link. Our church actually, they wrote to the local councillors, which was for Easter House, and just said we were praying for them and if they wanted to know. So I mean, one of them came back and said she'd burst into tears when she got the letter, because people didn't do that normally, so that was really nice.
Oh, that's good, because we were told to do that. So
yes, absolutely, that's right. And I think sometimes we do look at the MPs and MSPs, and we kind of maybe sometimes forget the councillors, but so I just always like to encourage people to do that. So I was quite happily doing that, and the 2008 then, we got to kind of June, and I was looking forward to holiday, just like teachers and people. You get to the end of June, everyone's looking forward to holiday. And I think it was the Friday, they announced that the MP for this area was standing down, a guy called David Marshall, and there was going to be a by-election, and the by-election was going to be in 4 weeks' time during the Glasgow Fair, which had never happened before.
Was he a Labour guy?
Yes. And it was pretty solid Labour. Glasgow was solid Labour, and this, it was pretty well unheard of, and it looked like it was, a quick by-election, get it out the way without anyone noticing, kind of thing. However, it became more complicated. I don't know if you want to go into all the details of it, but the candidate who was expected to stand for Labour stood down for family reasons. They didn't have a candidate, and a friend of mine who had stood previously decided he was not going to stand for the SNP, so I put my name forward and was selected. Only 3 weeks before the actual election, so it all happened incredibly fast, and it was very high profile, and of my political career, it's been the most high profile bit. And they had various hustings and things at the time, was quite a lot of TV coverage, and at one of them, the question of embryology was around at the time, as to what should and should not be allowed in regard to embryology. So, and that was linked to abortion. So that came up at one of the early on in the campaign, and all the other candidates were kind of pro-abortion, and I said, well, I'm against abortion and I'm against experimenting with babies, which I hadn't really prepared to say that phrase, but I said it, and the kind of whole place went ballistic because I'd said experimenting with babies. They'd have been happier if I'd said, working with embryos or something. Anyway, so that kind of put down a marker and sent out a signal, and so some people were very much on board for that, some people weren't.
In your party as well as in the broader...
Yes, because I mean, in the SNP, certainly then and still now, you get some who were like, I mean, it's a free vote on things like abortion, so some would be pro-life and some would be pro-choice, if that's what it's called. So, I guess some of the people remember this that were watching that around that time, but there was posters in every lamppost, like umpteen posters in every lamppost. It was quite remarkable. And but I suppose in retrospect it was good. At the time I felt quite stressed. But the church was good. I mean, some of the folk in the church made me meals and things because they knew I couldn't, because I'm single and live on my own, but they reckoned I could, I needed some food or something. So I was well looked after, and lo and behold, big shock, we won what was, I think, the third safest seat. Wow. For Labour. So,
are you pretty convinced that the Lord was directing you through that? The fact
well, I felt God was in control. I mean, the fact that I hadn't really planned any of this. I was quite happy in the council, and it suddenly all kind of happened, and the way opened up for me to be the candidate. But I didn't have a kind of word or anything that I was going to get elected, and with agreement with the SNP. I mean, most of them, one or two said he's going to get elected, but. And what actually happened, of course, with Labour was that Margaret Curran had become, who was quite high profile at the time, became the Labour candidate. And so she was the favourite in the polls and with the bookies and things after that. So it was quite a big surprise. It was a small margin, 365 majority.
And what year was this?
2008. So I became an MP. So I'm down in Westminster, and then I did get involved in pro-life and like the embryology bill and things. Which I didn't know much about, and still don't know much about. So that was good, and you get a free vote on a number of issues, and that was down there. But I mean, I've tried to be open about my faith in all of these settings. I'm occasionally you get somebody coming to ask you about your faith and so on. I think there's a bit of an extra problem in politics that political debate tends to be very black and white, and it's difficult for people, I think extra difficult for people to say they're a bit unsure about something, even if they are. So I'm not sure anywhere is easy to share the gospel with or evangelise or whatever, but it can be quite hard in the political side.
Like, I mean, I'll do this a wee bit after, but some of our members sent in questions, and one of them was like, do you think your Christian faith has helped you, like, in politics? Like, is there maybe virtues or fruits of that have been helpful? Or do you think it's hindered you in the sense that you're coming for a lot more opposition than you would? Well, I guess both.
Yes, both of these things, absolutely. As I've described it to you, I do see God leading me through my life, and if it wasn't for my faith, I wouldn't be there. I mean, I wouldn't be living in Barlanark. I wouldn't have gone to Nepal. So I mean, the whole thing is linked into my faith. So I cannot imagine my life without Christian faith. So absolutely, I believe God's led me into that, put me there, whatever. I think there's different things. I mean, one, and I should be careful because. There's probably, if we use the term evangelical, there are probably half a dozen evangelicals in the Parliament. So that's quite good, that's encouraging and all the rest of it. There's others who have different levels of Christian faith, So I don't know where they stand exactly, but, there's 6 that are pretty open about it. And kind of lost my train of thought there. Yes, but, so and they are all different. I mean, if you looked at the 6 of us, we're not all the same.
Like, as you said, it's cross-party, like from this
Yes.
guy in the Conservative, isn't there? You meet with one of the other SNP guys as well to pray with, like.
Yeah, we have a prayer group once a month,
Yeah.
and that's open to people working in the Parliament and MSPs. And so nobody makes it all the time, but people make it when they can. So that's encouraging. And I can talk to, well, I think, I'm careful mentioning names.
No, I was about to say something there, so I better not say that.
I think I can be quite open about this one. So Murdo Fraser, I got on pretty well with, although politically.
Yeah, I was going to say, politically probably not, but.
No, probably not, that's right. And at the time of the referendum in 2014, some of the churches particularly wanted to have Christian speakers on both sides. So Murdo and I ended up doing this kind of tour. I think we ended up with 14 sessions where we went either to one church or a group of churches, and were able, I think, to have a more civilised debate. In fact, actually, I was surprised because once or twice people actually commented that it was good to have that tone that we managed to have between us and discuss what was a big subject in a kind of civilised way. And I mean, I would hope always to do it in a civilised way, but that would be one thing, partly to answer your question, that the way we do politics as Christians should be a bit more gentle, a bit more respectful. Now, I do say quite hard things to people sometimes. I was critical of one of my colleagues yesterday openly in the chamber. So I'm not saying I get it right all the time, but I think that would be one area where, and hopefully more honest. And for me personally, it's helped me be more small I independent. So we were talking about tax the other day because we're looking at the budget, and I kind of took a slightly different line, both from my party and frankly from everyone else, because, well, basically I said I was open to raising taxes, which nobody else is really saying. So, and again, I see that as faith helping me stand a little bit more independently. But that doesn't mean all the other Christians would go down the same route as me on that or anything else. And the thing is, if you're in government, you are limited by the government. So I'm a backbencher, I'm not in the government, and that gives me a bit more freedom. But I know I push the boundaries at times, and I've been warned at times and different things. So there's a kind of balance in there.
I was going to say that. So you were an MP down in Westminster. Was that one term that you were there?
Well, it wasn't. It was only barely 2 years because it was a by-election. Then we came to 2010.
And Margaret Curran got the seat back.
She got the seat back. That's right. And I was out. So.
And then you were MSP.
Well, I had a year out.
The
Did some
area.
voluntary work with Glasgow City Mission and the Citizens Advice, and then got back in. And again, that was a surprise. 2011 to get in as an MSP because again, it was a strong Labour seat, and that was a surprise.
And then you held that last time.
Yes, 2016, that's right. So, and now we're 2021.
So, like, obviously over that time, there's been some pretty significant ways you've had to, or maybe not necessarily had to, but you did stand up against what would be the prevailing opinion, I'm sure, both with the Parliament and in your party about some of the issues. Like, I guess there was same-sex marriage debate at that point. Like, even abortion has been rumbling on about these kind of things. Like, so I guess that, like, must have been hard. Is there times that your party have pushed against you? Have you found it hard to take a principled stand? Have you been made to don't say that word. Do you think you've been sidelined at all because of your stands in these things? Or
I get more of a row, often for just my tone or when I speak about conscience issues or something. So I could come back to that. On the because there's a free vote on abortion, assisted dying, same-sex marriage, yes, there was a bit of pressure, but the official line was that you were free. And so I didn't have a huge amount. I remember when we came to the main debate on same-sex marriage, I think one of my colleagues was sitting behind me making faces. And it is unusual. Most of the stuff is party, and you're pretty much signed up to that, and it's a big deal not to. But that one was free, I think, for virtually all the parties, and it was interesting working cross-party because I'd one or two of the Labour SPs were strong Catholics and very much on board, and we worked very closely together, which was good, and with some of the kind of Christian organisations like CARE and SPUC and all these different ones, which has been good as well. So, but I did, at the time, I was keen. Well, the Christians pray about the tone. I mean, the tone in society wasn't very nice around same-sex marriage, and I was keen that in the Parliament, we shouldn't all be kind of hating each other. We could be able to disagree without that. So, and I asked quite a lot of people to pray around that time. And when it came to the debate, I was thinking what kind of tone to take, and I kind of knew that there'd be a lot of this, well, I'm in love with someone, so I should get married to him. And it wouldn't be on the kind of heavy theological side. It would be on this more emotional side. So I thought, I think God gave me the idea. I thought, well, I'll talk a bit more about that. So I said, well, this debate's about relationships, and for me, the key relationship is my relationship with Jesus. So just saying that was a little bit unusual, let's say.
In the Parliament?
In the debating chamber. So I said it anyway. And a lot of the time you don't know what reaction you've got. I mean, people notice these things.
Yeah.
Although I got a nice text from one of the Tory staff members who said, "That was fantastic, I can't believe you said that," So that was good, at least somebody noticed. So a wee bit of encouragement is nice along the way as well. So, that was okay, but sometimes I get more grief. I was fairly gentle this week saying that I thought we could raise taxes, but, if I go too far, I'm trying to think of an example, but, they may not like my tone or the way I say things, and I think I would be seen as being a little bit more independent. Because I feel the Parliament as an institution is quite important, and, for any country that's true, not just ours. And that's true again across the parties, because you get some very good, Malcolm Chisholm was an example, a Labour MSP, who took that kind of bigger view and was prepared to, at least ask questions of, where we're all going and things. So I've got more respect for people like that,
Again, so what's been great here to see is how, as you said, that your Christian faith has been the kind of what's guided you through all of this, through every step of the way, which is encouraging. Today, as you think back, I guess, talk through your childhood, you think, yeah, I'm still, Jesus is still why I'm here, he's still the centre of what's going on. Have you seen continued growth throughout that time? Or where's there been challenging periods, do you think? Or?
Yes, I don't know we're best placed to measure our own growth, are we? Because you don't see things often changing, and I always remember in Nepal, because there was quite a lot of, I think what most people would say, spiritual warfare in Nepal. And I remember a friend who was from much more of a Brethren background saying, I thought I'd overcome certain things in my life, and now here I'm struggling with them again. And so, I don't think Christian life is like this.
Yeah, it's much more.
Anyway, yeah, you go up and down, and things you think you've got on top of, you haven't. So, I think it's a question of faith that, yes, he is able to keep until that day what I've entrusted to him, and so it's a mixture, isn't it? A lot of it depends on God and what he's working out and things. So I don't think we see ourselves growing. Kids don't see themselves growing unless you put them up against the wall and mark them, don't you? So I guess we are the same.
But there's still been that same commitment, though. You're still.
Well, I hope so. Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't. There's days I've struggled. In Nepal, I had situations, where I struggled. I was living and working in Kathmandu, and I had a network of friends, and I was in the church, and it was great. And then the mission decided they were short of an accountant person in another town called Tan Sen. So they decided I was going, and they didn't discuss it. Well, they did discuss it. I said no, and then they still said, "You're going." And that's something I really, really struggled with, and it kind of drove me to prayer. And so, that was a kind of down point in one sense, but there's, again, I'm hesitant to quote books because so many of the books I've read are probably so long ago. But there was one I think called something like "The Bumps Are What You Climb On," and so the difficult bits are actually where we grow more, I think. And so I would look back on that as an experience where I grew, but right at the time it did not feel good. And that's probably been true in other aspects of my life as well. So, but I'm always open to growing and being challenged, and even this, you're asking me questions, it makes me think about things. And am I being as evangelistic as I should be, or do I share my faith enough as I should be?
That's one of the things that somebody asked, do you find yourself, so it was great to hear you talk about mission as one of your passions, wanting to see people who didn't know Jesus come to know
Absolutely,
Jesus.
yes.
And I guess being in your public role now, it would be easy for your focus to be in more social issues that Christians are obviously concerned about, and other people are concerned about. But have you still got that same desire, do you think, to see people who don't know Jesus come to know Jesus? And are there ways you're able to get involved in still doing that?
Well, I hope so. I mean, as I've said all the way through, I don't see one as my gift as evangelism. And, I used to think, I should be an evangelist, or we should all be evangelists. But, I think now I accept that that's not probably the case. Although I think there's a wider point that the churches need to encourage the gift of evangelism a bit more.
But you did say earlier, didn't you, that we should all still try and share our faith,
well, absolutely,
even if
yes.
we're not
Yes.
big evangelists.
Yes, yeah, exactly, that's right, yes. So that's how I see it more. So I should be open with my faith, and if it's appropriate, when it's appropriate. And I could also throw in there, we have things called cross-party groups in Parliament, and they could be on anything. I mean, I do one on railways, and there's ones on like multiple sclerosis and all sorts of things. And they're not officially part of the Parliament, but they're recognised by the Parliament, and the idea is that MSPs go and interest groups go and things. So I lead one on freedom of religion or belief, which is primarily about persecuted Christians and others around the world, although we do look at things here as well. David Robertson, you may have heard of. We've had him speak. And so
I've seen some interesting chat between you guys on social media.
So, I suppose, and we have a prayer breakfast which I head up. So, I think if you ask people, most of the MSPs, who's religious in the Parliament, my name would be up there somewhere. But yes, it's a question of what you share and when and how. And I suppose I feel like I did say at one point, how we do politics, and that would apply to how you teach in a school, how you nurse in a hospital, how you are a pastor, how you are an engineer, how you do anything. The way we do it should be just that little bit different. Probably not swearing so much, and possibly, other things. And so I suppose I see that, and that's quite hard to measure and hard to see, And I mean, my hope is that, because I try to be truthful, other people lie a bit less. But, how do you measure that? If they're being a little bit more honest than if I wasn't there. But I don't know how you measure that.
So, obviously, you said you're 63,
yes,
which I was surprised by, John.
So am I, yes.
I thought you were at least 80. No. What do you see going forward? Like, do you think retirement's on the horizon, or have you any plans for the rest of your life? You just see what Lord's going to do?
Yeah, I mean, politics, I think there is one thing about politics which there is not a lot of job security. And, as I say, I have won what were considered safe seats, so I should know, and I do know that, there are no safe seats, and I do not have a safe seat. So you can only really think of the next election. I have been vetted by the party, so the party approved me, not altogether plain sailing, I have to say, but I wasn't the only one. We were kind of questioned about things I'd said and done. But I got through that, and then the local party has selected me again not without challenge. People, others thinking maybe I could be more inclusive, as they would say. But I have got through that. So I am the candidate for the next election, and so once again, another election, we're in God's hands as to what happens. I mean, apart from maybe if I could retire and I could do more in the church, I mean, my church involvement, I think that is maybe one of your questions, has been restricted inevitably. And so I can't be involved in the cafe, for example, through the week and all these things. But that's right, and I need to accept that. Yeah. So I'm sure God's got a plan, so I'm just kind of waiting to find out what God's plan is. I mean, another aside is that the campaigning for this election is really weird. We can't do all the things we normally do. But if I'm in it, I mean, I'm not going to say when I'm retiring, but 66 is the normal retiral date, so I think it's unlikely I would stand after I was 66.
That's great. Well, that's been really interesting, like, kind of just looking back in your life, like, certainly the political side as well, like, heading towards retiring. Like, are you married? Have you got kids at all?
No, I'm happily single.
Happily single?
Yeah, well, absolutely. 1 Corinthians 7 talks about, being married, being single, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And in
Jesus was.
Sometimes in the churches, we could go on all day with this. Sometimes in the churches, there is quite a lot of expectation that everyone's going to get married. And I certainly, when I was younger, did assume I would get married. And there's a whole story to that, which involves somebody from Northern Ireland, but we'll not go there either. But, I mean, right now, I am very happy I'm single. And, you know, I believe, again, that's just one of the ways God has led me. And it's not the norm and it's not for everyone. But, you know, Paul talks about there being, you know, clear advantages if you're single. And, clearly it gives me more time that I don't spend with family that... Well, the question is, what do I do? Do I reply to emails or do I actually spend more time with God? But, you know, I have been reading more through the COVID, just because I've had more time, and I've tried to be a bit more disciplined about, you know, I used to read a lot as a student, then frankly I have not been reading a lot, especially of Christian material, and over the last year or so I've been trying to make more of an effort to get back to that. But again, you know, if there's younger people watching here who are thinking about the whole marriage question, yes, marriage is great, marriage is the norm, having kids, having family, absolutely, but a valid part for some people in the Christian life is to stay single, and that can be very satisfying, very fulfilling. Risks as well, you become selfish, you get everything, I get to do what I want, listen to the radio programs I want, eat the food I want, don't have to compromise. So yes, there's risks, but there's a lot of pluses as well, and a lot of kind of freedom. And you know, I don't have to. Some of my colleagues, you know, if they're outspoken, the danger is that, you know, their partner or their kids get mocked or get a difficult time at school or something like that. You know, so that's an area that I don't have to worry about.
And you can totally see the Lord's hand in that throughout. I mean, your story of being in these different places would have been a lot harder, maybe unlikely, if there was.
Well, Nepal was a good example. I mean, as a single guy, and it'd be different now because I'm in my 60s. But I mean, in your 20s in Nepal, I mean, in a young culture, you know, a single guy fits in really well, and it was male dominated, I accept, so it was more of a challenge if you were a single woman, but it meant, you know, if I went to meet 5 Nepali friends or a Nepali family, well, I'm just one, I'm no threat to them, and I don't have a self-contained unit. Whereas a family going to meet another family, there's just a different dynamic in that, and there's a good side to that. But no, I've seen many opportunities where, and even if I walk around the constituency, I'm on my own, so I think people feel happier to speak to me if I'm there with a group. They maybe don't.
Right, anyway, John, that's been great. Really encourage you to see the Lord's hand through all of that. And you've touched a little bit in the politics here as well, so actually you've probably answered most of the questions that some of the members of our church kind of asked. But let me just go through a few of them because they'll probably shoot me if I don't. One of the things I wanted to kind of, I guess, get clear was that, because we've had conversations in the past about your kind of more ecumenical side work of going to the Catholic churches and all that kind of stuff. And what I've appreciated about you, and even in your kind of public on Twitter and Facebook and all that, is that you are keen to listen to other people and you're not jumping in there with a lot of what could be perceived as anger or sometimes, to be fair. But like, you're, I guess, how much should I say, broader than I would be. I'd be perceived as a fundamentalist that would be like shutting everybody down, and you're at least more ready to listen to broader perspectives. But I do think it's been clear, again, as we've went throughout your story, that at the heart of the gospel, there's probably a strong like agreement between us more than in many other ways. So, like, has there been, would you still class yourself an evangelical throughout your life? Is that still where you're at? And what would you mean by that? What do you mean by I am an evangelical Christian?
Yeah, I mean, it's a term that probably has changed its meaning a bit over the years.
That's what I think, because when you said it, when you were in SU, I'm sure it had different connotations then than even today.
I think probably in SU I was young enough I wasn't so much aware of it, but certainly as a student, you know, it became much more an issue. But I mean, you know, clearly the largest church, the main church is the Church of Scotland in Scotland, and it has changed over the years, and I would say probably become more evangelical. Yeah, I mean, you know, my faith's in God, not in the Bible, and then we can argue over whether it's infallible or inerrant or these different words. But yes, all of that is key to me. I mean, I don't understand every bit of the Bible, but I very much see it as my guiding principle. And so, yeah, I mean, having said I agree, I see something good, I get something good from every church service I go to. There's also things I disagree with in every church service I go to, even my own. And so, I'm not sure I'm answering your question here.
So we would usually talk about the whole one of the ways we would think about the gospel is God, man, Christ response kind of thing.
Yes.
And so I think there's clearly big agreement on God, person of Jesus, definitely. Like man, so we would talk a lot, and again I spoke to Stuart about this last week, about sin and our rebellion against God. Now, not necessarily had you use those words throughout your kind of story. Like, is that something, have you got an understanding of that we are sinners, that people are sinners who need saved? Is that at the heart of what you're meaning?
I mean, I grew up, again, I'm wary now of saying anything. It goes back to when I was growing up, it's long ago, but something called the Four Spiritual Laws, which was a little booklet.
Yeah, I think I remember this, brother.
And I think there's modern versions of it, but that's what it was called at the time. And, that was basically God created the world, we have sinned, Jesus came to die for our sin, we need to have faith in Jesus, and I think that was pretty much the key points. And I haven't changed.
Because we spoke about atonement, about the necessity of Jesus dying for our sins, and that being at the centre, like the Apostles' Creed, it's there as well.
Yes, I mean, I'm not not an evangelist. I've said that. I'm also not a theologian, so you would probably lose me quite quickly if we got into propitiation.
Yeah, propitiation.
Some of these words, but I mean, I would see myself as being mainstream evangelical, and really the most important need for somebody is to know God.
And what happens if they don't? So what happens if someone doesn't become a Christian?
Well, that's a tricky one. I got C.S. Lewis's, some of his books for Christmas, because I read them as a student and I hadn't read them for a while, and I didn't even have them in the house. And I've just been reading a book called The Great Divorce. And although that was written, I think during the war actually, Second World War, I would encourage people to read that, because it is a view of heaven and hell, and put in quite a good way, I think, because yes, I believe in hell and I believe in heaven, but I think there's a lot of misunderstandings around hell and how people end up in hell, and one of C.S. Lewis's arguments really is that it's our choice. We've all got a choice, and it's best if everyone's heard the gospel, so then they can choose the gospel or not. But there's a sense in that people who don't want to know Jesus now and follow God's way are not going to suddenly want it when they die. So they wouldn't actually want to be in heaven, because that's what it'll be about. It'll be all about God, more so than here. So it'll be more real in a sense. And C.S. Lewis has the picture of even the grass in heaven is so solid that we would kind of cut our feet on it, because we are so ephemeral, if that's the right word. And hell is so small that they couldn't even get into it if they wanted to. So I'm more comfortable, I think, now in that kind of talking in that kind of way about heaven and hell.
Side of it, John,
well, you can call it that if you want, yes. But I would emphasise our choice. I mean, you could also get into, predestination and election and all of these kind of things, which I don't think I really probably want to go to. But it's clearly both God's choosing us, which I'm very grateful for, because I don't think I did anything to deserve it. But we also have the choice to respond, and one thief on the cross did respond, and one thief on the cross didn't respond. And so it seems very clear in Jesus' teaching that there's a black and white, the sheep and the goats, or the wise and the foolish.
And again, so why I wanted to say that is because I do think that that's at the heart of what it is to be a Christian, obviously. Yes. And because there is agreement there, now again, I would probably use different terms, I would probably cast that a bit stronger in different ways, but because there's agreement there, I think therefore there's a freedom to disagree on other areas around about, and even significant areas. So there might be ways that I would disagree with probably even you, and therefore we'd struggle to be in the same church together if we were going to play them out, those kind of disagreements. But actually we're still in the kingdom, and therefore I think that's where you'd be really helpful for many of us Christians in Scotland who feel that because you're there you've been able to have a voice and represent a broader demographic, because there is agreement there at the heart of the gospel. But one of the things that we've been asked here, which I find interesting, is that it seems to be you get hatred, maybe too strong a word, you get significant opposition from two places. One being a kind of secular society that doesn't agree with your views on abortion and things like that. And I've seen you seem to be quite gentle most of the time, or you're okay with engaging with that. I do see you also get significant opposition from Christians.
Yes.
I wanted to ask how you respond to that, because in some ways I imagine that could be harder, because maybe you shouldn't. Yeah, I don't know. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's quite difficult, because I don't think it's good that Christians are having arguments in the open square, as a principle. So that would be my starting point, and I think it's disappointing that the church, now for 2,000 years, most of the time, has been, at loggerheads with each other, and that affects sectarianism, it affects, the Reformation, all of these things, all of which good has probably come out of, but it's not been a good witness, because Jesus specifically prayed that his people would be one, and that other people would know we're Christians because of our love for each other. And people do notice that. So I remember on a student mission in Sauchiehall Street doing a drama, and I don't think it was about love, I don't know what it was about, but somebody came up and said, "Oh, I can see you all love each other," that's amazing. But it shows that people do pick that up. And even the respect, like Murdo Fraser and I had for each other when we were doing these debates. So I just find it very sad, the kind of splits, and especially as we move. I think it's different in Europe in the 1600s or the 1700s. Everyone was nominally Christian at least, and theology and whether the Pope was in charge or not were the key issues. Nowadays, we are in this secular society. Some people have said there's only 2% of the population of Scotland have a living faith, which makes us on the verge of being unevangelised. Yeah. So really, I think, was it the men of Issachar understood the times? I forget. I always get Issachar and Zebulun mixed up.
Oh, okay, I thought you were quoting some historian guy. Yeah, Issachar the Bible.
The Bible.
Definitely.
Issachar, right, okay. They understood the times, and I think that's a key one, is, what are the battles we're fighting now? They're not even the same as the ones for 50 years ago, let alone 500 years ago. And I think we're in such a secular situation now, and that we really need, if we can agree with people, and frankly on freedom of religion, that would go to, because the Muslims are being persecuted in the Uyghurs in China and in Burma. So even at that kind of level, we could work with Muslims or any faith. But specifically when we come down to the Christian faith and the different branches of it, yes, I'm disappointed that the public see a very split lot, when from the public's point of view, the secular public's point of view, we agree we believe very much similar things, like the creed.
Yeah. I know it's hard because obviously the truth is important, so you can hear people say, like, it's loving to speak the truth, but I was reading again this week the whole, if you speak the truth in love. Yes. And it's not just as easy as saying speaking the truth is love, which is true as well, I think. But you need to speak the truth in love, and sometimes I would consider, even though again I have very strong theological opinions, and I'm sure fall into the trap of speaking just too fast and stuff. But it is, yeah.
Well, I was speaking to somebody who's autistic the other day, and at this point, because he's saying autistic people are always honest, we'll tell the truth. And I said to him, yeah, but this thing about how you tell the truth is also important. And he, to be fair to him, he understood that.
That's good. I'm actually just scanning down these, and I reckon that you have covered most of these just throughout your story. People are asking, how have you found being an MP as a Christian? You spoke about that. Ever been encouraged to go against your convictions, to be quiet? You spoke about that. Opposition. Have you ever felt like quitting?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I said, if I had not been got through vetting or selection and I'd been forced to retire at this point, I think I could have adjusted to that. I don't remember feeling I wanted to walk away from it. It's been more that I've thought, I might be dropped or whatever. And as I say, it's not always been on the obvious kind of Christian issues or moral issues or conscience issues that the most difficulty has come from it. It could have been over just, what I say about tax or what I say about something else and so on. So sometimes that's been the kind of harder area.
And then the other stuff was, how does your church support you? You've spoke a little bit about that.
Yeah, we changed pastors. The previous pastor, a guy called Sandy Weddell, had been in the church for a long time and retired eventually a couple of years ago. So he was always very supportive of me. And so when I got elected, I used to teach in the Bible class, so I had to drop that. I used to be a trustee, dropped that. And I said to him, when I can't remember probably when I went to Westminster first time, I said, I think I should go and visit other churches. So he was supportive of that. So it does mean that 1 week I go to my own church and 1 week I go and visit another church, which I've been doing now for quite a while, although COVID's made it a bit more difficult. And I'm glad to say that when he retired, and we've now got a couple of pastors, they are also pretty supportive of that. So they do pray for me. And I mean, one thing our church has been doing during lockdown is a slightly shorter interview, I have to say, on what are you doing tomorrow kind of thing. Well, I will bring this book's been republished, so it's you may have heard of this one. Thank God It's Monday, which is by a guy called Mark Green at the London Institute of Contemporary Christianity, and I'm pretty sure it's been republished. So again, I would encourage people to read that. So that's the importance of our work, and I think you get this, that it's, some churches traditionally, we prayed for the Sunday school teachers who were with the kids for 45 minutes, but you didn't pray for the teachers who were with the kids for 45 hours, or not quite as much as that. And the importance of churches praying for and supporting people, all of us, not just politics, in the secular work. So kind of based on that idea, Neil and Pam were doing a little interview, this time tomorrow, I think it's called. And so, for example, I did that. And if they're away, I occasionally preach and things. So, no, I think my church is very supportive, which is good, because I have heard of churches. I heard of the horror story was an MP, I think possibly from Northern Ireland, who went to London as an MP and went to look for a church. And in one church he went to, at the end, they said, the minister said, "And what do you do?" And he said, "I'm in politics, I'm an MP." And they said, "I think you better find another church." Which is really, really sad. About any profession, if they said that just because of what somebody does.
David, one of the things, again, when we were keen to chat with you, I totally agree with that. I think that we need to encourage and empower people to live for Jesus, wherever that might be. And even when we do our internships, part of 20 schemes, and we're training guys from scheme backgrounds, and we're intensely pouring into their lives at the end of 2 years, and they're getting to do loads of ministry, we always say at the end of it, the Lord might call you into vocational, whatever you call that, ministry for a church, or you might go into the secular workplace, but wherever you are, you need to live for Jesus. You need to love Him and love others. And
that's where OM, even OM, I was doing accountancy, but OM is probably the part of my life where I was, most in that kind of Christian, intense training environment, which it was. And that has stood me, that's right, in good stead all the way through.
And the final thing is just how can our local church, how can other local church, how can other Christians encourage you and support you in your role as an MP? Is there anything specific? Obviously prayer, I would love to get some prayer points.
Prayer, that's right. And I send out a prayer newsletter because, again, I didn't mention that one, that was one of OM's requirements, that you send out a prayer letter. I think it used to be once a quarter or something like that. So I try once or twice a year to send out a prayer news with kind of some points for people to pray with. So if you're not getting that, I can get you it. I think the general one I always say to people is wisdom. In some of the areas we've been talking about. I think we're encouraged that although some people are evangelists and some are teachers and some are other things, we are all encouraged to ask for wisdom. And I think that's very much one, because kind of knowing which battles to fight, we've kind of talked around that. I cannot fight every single battle that's out there that we could. So I think we need guidance, wisdom from God as to which battles to fight. And so I've felt that at times. There's been some which I could have been involved in, other Christian organisations have been involved in. The smacking ban was an example. I wouldn't say I was wildly enthusiastic about it, but I just felt it wasn't going to be one that I was going to, I felt I should be putting my time and effort into. Whereas assisted dying, same-sex marriage, and probably the transgender ones would be ones where I do feel I should be putting.
I think I appreciate that, and obviously we could spend another podcast talking about your political views. Deliberately didn't want to go there. I'm sure there's many ways we would agree and disagree on many of these things, but John, I'm just really thankful. Thank you for coming and giving us your time. It's been great to see the Lord's work throughout your life and your story, and how long has that been? Like 15 hours? Is that not too bad? An hour and 34? That's not bad. That's shorter than Stuart last week. We can tell him.
Yes, I didn't think it was going to be this long, but there you go.
No, that's really helpful.
That's great. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good. I think that's us.
Thank you for listening to the My Hope Story podcast. To find out how you can have your own hope story, go to www.myhopestory.co.uk.